The other thing I would like you all to learn, it's also about yin and yang in your charts, because that teaches you to understand yourself from the perspective of, are you an optimistic person? Are you a pessimistic person? When things happen to you, what do you normally do? So a yin person is generally more flexible. They are quite wise, but the opposite side is they are usually quite pessimistic. They look at things half empty. They are more fearful. The young person is actually more passionate. They are more optimistic, and therefore they can be more impulsive and impatient. Now, if you realize for each of the yin and yang, there are the positive aspects of a character and a negative aspect of a character. So what we are talking about here is really about balance, because if you look at these yin yang chart, the Tai Chi chart here, wherever there's a lot of yin, there will always be yang. Wherever there's a lot of yang, there will always be yin. So from this particular perspective itself, we are really talking about balance in your chart. So how do we identify basically the chart, whether it is a lot of yin or yang elements? Generally, the water element, it's more yin, it's colder, and metal element, it's also more yin. Now, I also see some questions about yang and yin elements in their chart and the counting of yang and yin elements. In today's session, I don't have the time to really talk about all the differences between yang and yin, but each of the 5 elements, there is the yang and yin. So if you have wood, there's yang and yin wood. If you have water, there's yang and yin water. So it's good to know these particular aspects. When we are counting the elements, what I would like you to count at the moment is not the yin element or the yang element. What I would like you to count in terms of element is the element of water and fire, because another way of looking at yin and yang is yin element is water, yang is fire. Okay, so this is about our outlook in life. So what I would like you to do is count the number of water. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's yin water or yang water, just count the number of water. In this particular chart, there are 2 water elements. There is a question to ask about, we count all the elements in all 3 rows. No, normally what we do is we count the elements actually in what we call the heavenly stem. Okay, this row, this is the first heavenly stem row. The next one where we will count is all the hidden stems that's actually below here. If you remember earlier, I mentioned because Chinese actually group all the elements into animal horoscopes. So hidden in each of these animal horoscopes are all the elements. So when we are counting the elements, we count the first row and we count the 3rd row. That's how you should count. So thank you for asking this question. So what does it mean actually to have a lot of water and a lot of fire in your chart? Water generally means, if you remember, I mentioned earlier, it's more yin in nature, especially if you are yin water. So we have yang water and yin water, but especially if you are water. But generally water, basically from the outlook perspective, you are someone who you like freedom, number 1. Number 2, you are also probably a little bit more pessimistic if you have absolutely no fire in your chart. Okay, that's what it means. So if you have fire, then you are very optimistic a person. You will probably look at things half full rather than half empty, but can be overly optimistic if you have 0 water in your chart. So remember I mentioned earlier, it is important that when you are looking at elements, there should always be a balance. So there was also a question, I think, in the chat that says, what happens if I have 3 fire and 3 water? Okay, so when you have 3 fire and 3 water, imagine, what does water do to fire? Water downs fire. Okay, so what we call water clash with fire. So what happens when water clashes with fire? Those who say trouble, that's the right answer. Those who say neutral, it depends on how you take a look at it. Remember, when there's a lot of fire, you douse it with water to stop the fire. But what happens in the process? There's a lot of steam that is created. Okay, so in your own Bazi chart, if you have a lot of fire and water, these are what we call opposing elements. So internally, there's always a struggle in terms of the decisions that you want to make, in terms of your temper, in terms of what you want to do. And if you do have a lot of these water and fire in your chart clashing, it is important for you to realize that you need to take a step back, let the steam clear before you take a decision. Because if not, in the long term, when you have a lot of these struggles within, there will be a lot of stress, and it will lead usually to some circulatory and heart issues. So that's what's important. And why did I bring this up actually for this particular session? There are many different points that I can discuss. Generally, it's because this year, like I mentioned before, in 2020, is a year with a lot of metal and water elements. These are the elements that are bringing more fear, they are bringing more pessimism. Now, if you are already a person who actually has got a lot of water in your chart and zero fire, if you have at least one or two fire, I think an experience, if you have gone through a period of experience to really understand how to handle crisis, then it will still be okay. But if this is something that is the first time that's happening to you and you're really not sure how to go ahead, then understanding this point is important, because when you have too much water in your chart, and this year is a year with metal and water, metal produces water, so there will be lots of water. So if you imagine a picture, it's actually the cold, dark blue sea or river. So you will be really always thinking about things from the negative aspect. And it is important that you realize and take a step back, especially when people feedback to you, hey, why are you so pessimistic? Why are you always dowsing water onto me, for example, or that you always look at things from the half full aspect? Why can't we be more positive? These you have to realize, and it's important because especially when we head down towards second half of 2020, everywhere else, news, social media will be all the negative stuff. If you feel that it's overwhelming you, you need to stop listening and looking at those. You need to then actually take a step back, because whatever crisis in life, whatever things that go through in our life, it's always served as a lesson to us. If you have followed any of my videos on my journey to become an author, there'll be this phrase that you'll hear: things happen to us for a reason. Whether is it good or bad, okay, we will always learn from it. And it's only when we learn from it, we will become stronger and we will thrive and do better. So if you have a lot of water and metal in your chart and you have no fire, this is the time to find what you are motivated by, what your passion is. Fix a goal and go towards it. Do not think too much. Just do it. So that's for the people with a lot of water in their charts. Now, if you are looking at people with a lot of fire in their charts, for example, myself, I have a lot of fire in my charts. I'm born on the day of fire. I'm born in the month of fire. So if you have also got combinations of fire, and when there's a lot of water, what happens? Whatever that you do this year, there will be obstacles. Okay, why? Because water downs fire, right? So steam will happen first. So do not get upset. Just take a step back. Maybe it's also a good opportunity actually for you to relook at what your plans are, rethink, and be a bit more cautious. Now, the water people and the metal people are overly cautious, whereas the fire people or people with a lot of fire in their charts are overly optimistic and impulsive and impatient, quick one to get things moving. So this is a good time for you to then take a step back and relook at some of the situations. That's one. Two, expect that there will be disruptions and obstacles to whatever that you do. Because if you adopt the attitude and be aware of this, because of these clashing of elements, you don't get upset. You just say, okay, what's new? You know that maybe the first time will not go through, you can try a second time or a third time. So that's how you handle the water and fire elements in the chart.